Hey everybody, it is Friday and I just wanted to pop on here and do a couple things. I want to get some housekeeping out of the way just right off the jump, and that is you'll notice it's just me, Wes Wyatt, the producer, director, sometimes bodyguard, food stealer, all the different things that Randy covers. And also that Randy's not here. He's out there doing the blocking and tackling and road warrior type stuff that he always talks about, delivering donuts, shaking hands, kissing babies, all that stuff, which is just awesome. And the third thing is, I apologize for the mark on my eye. I had some cancer removed, the non troubling type stuff, just getting older cancer. And because I'm taking blood thinners and all that, it's bleeding for some reason because I wiped it off. And anyway, I just want to let you know you're not seeing things. There's not a mark on the screen that you're going to try to wipe off. But I wanted to cover a couple things that Randy and I are always talking about, not only this week, but, we hammer some of this stuff in at all times. I'll pepper in a couple other things, but it's the have to versus get to. That's the first thing I want to cover with you, and it's pretty much the whole thing. But Randy was talking this week while he was out delivering donuts. If you caught the video, if you didn't, go back and watch it. And that is the idea of having to get up in the morning to go to a client, having to go get donuts, having to make the service call, instead of I get to wake up in the morning. And believe me, after an ordeal that I had this year, last year into this year, getting to wake up is, a great thing. Not being in a hospital bed is another great thing. Being able to pop out of bed and not being in that hospital bed, not being, restricted from getting out of chairs on your own, all that, hospital stuff. And, the other thing is, just instead of having to go see a client, getting to go see a client. That is something that's so important. I can remember when I used to drive to work, about a 20-minute commute. I would talk to a buddy of mine. Shout out to Ed Drost. And I would say, oh man, I'm going into the joint. And I called it that because it felt like prison, and we would talk and say, man, if we could only figure out, something for me that would get me out of there and into the public and, not have to go do, something that it's not, that bad, but something that I dislike for, 9 hours, away from my family, away from my kids, away from my pets, away from, being able to have that freedom and autonomy of doing, what I do now, which is exactly that, freedom and autonomy. So instead of having to do stuff, I've got a big list today, getting this video out, is something that I get to do, not that I have to do. Going and working out before the gym gets busy from other people coming in is something I get to do, not something I have to do. Just a myriad of other things. It's very, very healthy to have that I get to do something rather than the I have to do something mentality. Because if you do that, you're going to find that things just absolutely switch for you immediately. And I just want to talk to you about, something else that was kind of funny, and that is an anniversary story for you. I was in the hospital during our anniversary, our 25th anniversary, with my beautiful wife, Jules, and I. And I was just having come out of intubation, and I was a mess. I couldn't walk, couldn't, support my own weight. I was very, very loopy, and, my short-term memory was jacked up. I mean, just you name it, I had it going on. And I kept trying to get out of the bed. And my wife was like, listen, you can't get out of the bed, because she knew and didn't want to tell me, you can't walk, you can't support yourself, you can't do any of that stuff. But man, the bed was too short for one thing. I'm a big guy. I run about 6'3", 6'4", and the bed was short. It was not that long, and I had to kind of curl my legs. It was driving me crazy. I could finally get my legs over. She'd come over and put them back, and she knew that it was going to be a problem. But in my head somewhere, somebody had told me that we will eventually get you into a chair. Well, I had that in my head. Why? I have no idea because again, my short-term memory was really crazy, but I was bound and determined to get in that chair. And there were only a bed, a chair, and you know how hospital chairs are. They will push out into essentially like a recliner slash bed, and not a great one. And the other chair that was in there was a chair, just like a folding chair, not something that you wanted to get into. And I wanted to get in that chair. And that was the chair that Julianne was in. Well, I talked about it and talked about it, drove Julianne half nuts. And she finally was like, fine, I'm going to go talk to the nurses, see if they can get a couple, guys down here to get you in that chair. And once they finally, I think it took, several people, 4, 5 people to, figure out how to get me kind of maneuvered over to the chair. And once they finally got me into the chair, I kind of got into it and I was like, you know, this isn't as comfortable as I thought it would be. I think I want to go back into the bed. And Julianne was like, listen, pal, you're in that chair, for the rest of the night. And so it was just kind of funny that, you think that you want something, and then when you finally get it, it may not be what you were looking for. Now, in the case of driving to the joint, or many other things in my life, it did have that reward that I thought it was going to have. But in that form of that chair, I got into the chair and I was like, oh, this just isn't for me. And she's like, it is for you because I'm not going through all that again. And that was on our anniversary. She was about ready to kill me. So, but I do want to talk about a saying that I saw today, and how this is a great, version of what we're talking about. And that is, I just want to, read it just so I don't mess it up. And that is, your current situation is someone else's dream. So be thankful. And that's so true. That kind of ties this whole thing together, guys. And like I said, I'll keep it short. For Friday, we don't have a guest. Randy's gone, and we just wanted to bring you a message. The building win, idea of this, and that is, right now you're living in something that, if you think about, your past, I can think about something I told my wife the other day, and that is, when I was a younger man, I remember a certain car, being my dream car. And I knew, that it was going to be something that I was going to have to, work very hard for, just to get the payments, not to buy it, just to get the payments. And how it was my dream car. Well, I was walking out to our current car today, and not only is it leaps and bounds better than the car that I thought was my dream car, but we bought it straight out. I mean, no payments. So now I get into this car that every day. I probably, in the beginning was like, man, check this out, and washing it, and wiping every scuff off, and or a piece of dust or whatever, bugs, and walking around it, and checking it out and whatnot. And now, now that it's been 2, 3 years, it's not got that shimmer and shine that it did when we first got it, but it was leaps and bounds better than a car that I considered my dream car years ago. So and that's the same with everything. Right now, instead of using a phone, I've got equipment. You'll see a professional mic, I can remember propping up my phone, or having to stack books, for as my whatever you want to call, like I guess a tripod. Now there's tripods all around me. I've got professional lighting, that if I turn it off, and I'll do it for you right now, you'll see that, things are just, radically different. So let me turn off the studio lights. Okay. As you can see, this is what it would look like if I was, not using studio lights. But boom, I turn them on, and I've got lights that make me brighter, and get everything looking good. So it's just something that All these things are things that when I started, I was just, thinking to myself, man, it would be great if. Well, now I've got these things, so what you got to realize again, and I want to go back to it, your current situation is somebody else's dream. So be thankful. So it goes right back to what we were talking about. You get to, or you have to. You get to, or you have to. You want to think about that. You get to, or you have to. It's so many things in your life that, you get to go and do something. You get to have something. You get to talk to somebody. You get to wake up. I talk about my beloved oxygen habit all the time, guys. And what I mean by that is if you're above ground, no matter what's happening, you are getting to do something. And there's a lot of people that don't. Weeks ago, you saw me, getting very sappy about a friend of ours, a not only guest of the show, but a fan of the show, Cindy Kirpley. And, I was talking to her about her father and how he had passed and I got to live. It's something that you just don't realize, that the things in your life, that are someone else's dream, so, and in the case of, Cindy and her father, he's not here. I am. It's something that you got to realize that just by being here, you are already, kicking butt and taking initials because you don't have time to take names. But it is something you get to do every day. And I would highly suggest when you get up in the morning, recognizing that whatever your faith is, in my particular case, it's thanking Jesus that I got another day. And all through the day, I want you to stop and I want you to realize the things that you have around you, the glorious, just miracles that you don't even realize are there every day that you just, take, for advantage. And I just want you to stop and just take a beat and, realize the things that are happening around you and the things that you get to experience every day, because it is something that will blow your mind. When you sit there and actually, take stock of what's around you and the things that you get and the things that you got, you're going to be blown away. So anyway, guys, I hope that is something that, just opens your eyes, blows your mind, and, makes your day just, better and better. So until we talk next time, I just want to thank you for being a viewer and a supporter of Building Wins Live. We love you. And I hope Randy's back next week. I'm sure he will be. But if not, we'll continue doing this and bringing you the best, building wins side of it, and also the building side of it with awesome people from the industry. And just want to thank you for being here. So just, go out there, realize what you got, and, just exercise that I get to mentality, and you're going to love life. So until we talk next time, guys, have a dynamite day.